The Whispering Coffin. In the heart of Mnyangala, a small village hidden deep within the African wilderness, an ancient legend whispered through generations. At the center of the legend was a single, rotting coffin that sat undisturbed in the dense forest of Kibula, untouched by time or decay. No one knew who had placed it there or why, but everyone knew one rule: never go near the coffin, never touch it, never open it. The elders spoke of a time, long before the village even existed, when a powerful Mganga, a sorceress named Mama Zaina, was sealed inside. She had been accused of practicing dark magic, of summoning spirits that brought sickness and death. The villagers, desperate to end her reign of terror, had bound her inside the coffin alive and left her deep in the forest, where the spirits could never find her again. But the whispers, oh, the whispers never stopped. One night, 5 young men, Juma, Carissa, Wekesa, Otieno, and Baraka, sat around a small fire, sharing stories and drinking palm wine. The conversation turned to the legend of the Whispering Coffin. "That's just a story," Carissa scoffed, swigging his drink. "Something the elders made up to keep us from exploring the forest." Juma, the boldest of them, smirked. "Then let's prove it." The group fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, as if listening. "You're joking," Wekesa said, his voice unsure. "No," Juma said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Let's go to Kibula Forest. Let's find that coffin and open it. I bet there's nothing inside but rotting wood." Otieno shuddered. "The elders say—" "To hell with the elders," Juma interrupted. "Are you men or children?" Baraka hesitated but then grinned. "Fine, let's do it." With torches and knives for protection, the 5 friends made their way through the darkened village and into the depths of Kibula Forest. The journey was eerie. The deeper they went, the colder it became, though it was the middle of the dry season. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying strange voices. After an hour, they found it. The coffin lay in a small clearing, half buried in the ground, tangled with roots and vines. Its wood was aged, but the carvings on its surface were sharp, symbols none of them recognized. Juma stepped forward, grinning. "Ready?" Wexa gulped. "Maybe we should just leave it alone." But Juma and Carissa had already begun pulling at the vines. Otieno and Baraka helped, and soon the coffin was exposed. Then Juma placed his hands on the lid. The moment he touched it, a deep, inhuman sigh escaped from within. The group froze. The sound was not the wind. It came from inside the coffin. Juma hesitated, but pride forced him forward. He pushed the lid open. A blast of ice-cold air rushed out, and a faint, raspy whisper slithered into the night. "You have awakened me. Now I will follow you home." Panicked, the 5 friends ran. None of them spoke as they rushed back to the village, hearts pounding. They never looked back. That night, Juma was the first to hear it. At first, it was just a faint whisper outside his hut. Then it grew louder, calling his name. "Juma! Juma!" Terrified, he covered his ears, but the whispering came from inside his hut now. Then something moved in the darkness. A shadow, tall, thin, with glowing red eyes. The whispering turned into a scream. The next morning, Juma's hut was empty. His bed was untouched, his footprints the only ones visible in the dirt outside. He was gone. The village was in an uproar. The elders gathered, speaking in hushed tones. "Juma must have gone to another village," Carissa suggested, but his voice shook. The others knew better. That night, Wexa woke up to soft murmurs outside his window. Then he heard it. "Wexa, you left me behind, but I found you." The voice was inside his hut. Wexa screamed. By the time his family burst in, he was gone. Now the village knew the legend was real. The elders confronted Carissa, Otieno, and Baraka. "You have unleashed something we cannot contain," Elder Mzi Macau said. "You must go back. You must return the coffin to its resting place." "But the coffin is still there," Otieno stammered. Elder Macau's eyes were filled with sorrow. "Number, the coffin is gone." Desperate, the remaining 3 men returned to Kibula Forest. They searched the clearing, but the coffin was nowhere to be found. The only evidence it had ever been there was the disturbed earth where it had once rested. Then Baraka heard it, a whisper, a low, rasping voice calling his name. Baraka. Then something touched his shoulder. He spun around. Nothing was there. Otieno turned to Carissa. We need to leave. Baraka, breathing heavily, pointed at something ahead. A new grave, freshly dug, and from within, something was knocking. We need to bury it again, Carissa said. The elders said, bury what? Otieno whispered. The coffin is missing. Then the knocking stopped. A deep silence filled the forest. Even the insects ceased their songs. And then slowly, the grave began to open. Baraka screamed as a long, bony hand crawled out, its fingernails black and sharp. The figure pulled itself from the dirt, its red eyes burning in the darkness. It was Mama Zaina. Her voice was barely human, a mix of whispers and growls. You set me free. Now I will take you all. The three men turned and ran. By sunrise, only Carissa reached the village. Otieno and Baraka had vanished. The elders gathered around him, their faces grim. You cannot run, Elder Macau whispered. She will come. Carissa refused to believe it, until that night. As he lay in his bed trying to stay awake, the whispers began. Carissa! Carissa! He bolted upright. His hut was empty. Then he saw them. His friends, Juma, Wekesa, Otieno, Baraka, standing outside his window. Their eyes red, their mouths stitched shut. And standing behind them, towering over them, was her. The last thing Carissa heard was the sound of the wind whispering through his bones. The next morning, the village was silent. No one spoke of what had happened. No one looked toward the forest. The elders performed a ritual, but it was too late. The whispering coffin had vanished, but its curse had only begun. To this day, in the dead of night, villagers swear they can hear voices in the wind, a whispering that grows louder, calling their names. And if you hear it, don't answer.